Why should you play Dispatch by Adhoc Studios, a game keeping Telltale's legacy of play-to-watch games alive, where instead of sitting through an ad to unlock the privilege of playing more bare-bones gameplay, you sit through bare-bones gameplay to unlock the privilege of sitting through the next part of an actually pretty solid super show. You are Robert Robertson, aka aka man who works as an EMS dispatcher tasked to stand and deliver a team of superpowered degenerates from a life of superpowered villainy to a life of slightly less so. Long enough for Savage Haka here to fix your depowered power suit and affix the mecha to the man again. When I first heard of it, I should have been all manner of excited. I mean, how much more targeted of an audience do you need for a cowl-clad Cape Crusader caper focused on choice character and story than a wannabe game designer with a superpowered passion project and an RP and implied G in his name? And while I have overall enjoyed this semi-interactive virtual streaming experience, let's not kid ourselves. The internet has been glazing this game harder than Invisigal wants to be every second of her long-addled life, which is kind of weird to me because much like with Invisigal, this game's issues are just as visible as she isn't. Like how the man losing the mecha doesn't have quite the impact it probably should. I mean, it's a little hard to buy just how powerless he is now when the first thing we see is him Batmaning his way through half the tutorial with ease. And not to mention being forced to power through the eye roll strain as a result of having more MySpace models throwing themselves at me than when watching a Secret Girlfriend marathon.
My heart is so pink and empty, but not as pink and empty as my...
And don't get me started on the blatant bigotry of giving everyone's favorite Celtic Crusader a superfluous subtitled accent.
He had every right to punt me through the wall. Through the wall.
It'd be like if Megan the Fatherless over here had a line of dialogue saying, "Alright," and meanwhile the subtitles are like, "Aight." Now what was that you say? I'm being a smidge unfair. Perhaps picking a few nicks?
He's only punching decks!
Well, that's fair enough, so let's lay off the low-hanging fruit and move on to the main entree. Name a greater video game villain than the jaded failed filmmaker forced to toil in a medium they're embarrassed by. Now, is that how the folks at Adhoc feel? I don't know. What I do know is that if I felt that way and I had a story I wanted to tell but thought it'd probably do better steaming than streaming, I'd probably do a few things to make that happen. Like, I'd probably spread out the gameplay across several games of varying levels of mini, because at a certain point, adding to an existing system can be more difficult than adding a new one entirely, especially if the interactions said games have with the narrative and each other are relatively minimal. And if you have several games, each with its own occasional time to shine, they're kind of felt as a collective whole. It doesn't really matter how robust each individual minigame is, as it's not going to seem as jarring to most audiences, as long as they're relatively evenly spaced throughout the experience. Okay, so I got this minigame where you basically just like calibrate your mouse during a fight. Let's throw one in the first episode, one in the last episode, and then somewhere in the middle. There, perfect. Just enough to justify its existence. No less, and certainly no more, so it can be one more bit of sprinkling of interactivity onto the story I want to tell. Without actually affecting it, of course. It's garnish that looks like seasoning. I'd also probably make use of the wonderful so-and-so will remember that mechanic to signify significance. Never mind that there's no shortage of synchronized split-screen shorts out there to suggest that this isn't as much the case as one might think. And it also sounds counterintuitive because it means my players will naturally think any choice where that didn't appear didn't matter. And yes, it immediately takes away the tension the timer puts on these choices. And then yes, they'll spend the rest of the time wondering how this often seemingly innocuous little thing might come to bite them in the ass when it does, if it does, more than any of the other things where this text doesn't pop up.
What do you mean we'll remember that?
Unless Robert's got a secret superpower of clairvoyance, we have a game mechanic in a story game that routinely takes the player out of the story. But that doesn't matter, because I told them that some of the choices matter. That's what matters. Now, I wouldn't do that with any of the writing, of course. Like, I'm not going to just say the characters are funny. I'm going to actually put in the effort to make them funny, because it's part of the story I want to tell, you see? Now again, I'm not saying this is where Adhoc Studios is coming from, partially because I don't know, but mostly because I don't care, because it doesn't matter. What does matter is this game kind of feels like they are, and that is only just barely better. In Telltale's Walking Dead, I have more conversation options sitting in the back of the car for the first 2 minutes than I do in half an episode of Dispatch. It's nice for a game to involve me in the proceedings, to even pretend to care what I have to say, as opposed to begrudgingly throwing me the occasional bone. Emphasis on occasional. Plus, aside from the musical tonal shift in the last fight, there's not much of an indication for when the game's gonna switch from show to game and back. And there's nothing that keeps me more enamored with narrative or captivated by combat than twiddling thumbs over a keyboard waiting to be ganked by a gram of gameplay. Overall, the dialogue and QuickTime events serve as the game design equivalent of the unplugged controller you give to your little brother because Mom said I could play too. Fortunately, that's not the only gameplay tool we're working with.
Are we in kindergarten?
Sometimes I think the devs dislike the hacking minigame about as much as I do. Like, they really didn't want to add it, but the person with the money said to, so they did it anyway, but they're like kind of dragging their feet about it. I mean, why else would so damn many of them be so damn optional? You must choose either gameplay you're actually somewhat used to while trying to hear some funny dialogue and level up a character you like, or sitting in your little corner alone, computering away, solving problems for your team instead of leading them. Decisions, decisions. And with the episodic release, how many reps on the keyboard are you actually getting? Half the time, I kept forgetting hacking even existed. Never mind actually feeling like I got a good feel for that gameplay, which just made me want to skip them even more.
When the pain's constant, it's easier to get used to.
And some of the mandatory ones we do have kind of feels shoehorned in. Like there's one where you have to hack a car to stop it from running out of control. That's right, never fear, tech support is here. Gee, golly gosh, if only we had a superhero to send. Does anyone know a superhero? Is anyone here a superhero? Sure, we can send someone to snatch a 747 from the sky if we so choose, but tackling a Temu Tesla is a bridge too far. How much more classic superhero stuff can you get than stopping a car? It's like the first thing they did. Maybe in season 2 they could try to aim for something at least a little less contrived than that. Like maybe Invisigal gets stuck on a mission and we have to hack a clothes dryer to get her out. But they want Robert to be more directly involved in the missions, not just the leader giving the speeches and advice and blah blah blah. And as much as I totally wouldn't hate if they got hacking out altogether, there still is a way of doing what they apparently want while using hacking. When hacking means solving a puzzle fast enough to compute a cavalry charge that will rush into a glorified cutscene to save one of your team. There's actually some pretty good tension there, and it's one of the few places where gameplay and the other 80% actually feel like a somewhat cohesive whole. And without that jarring back and forth whiplash feeling I kept getting otherwise. I remember my first time playing episode 2, when I first really noticed this sort of loose but still kind of there sort of structure pattern they were going for. Introduce player to a teammate to focus on, have that teammate take center stage a little bit, and end the episode with a big finale where you work together with a little dialogue and a lot of dial-up, and that will affect the trajectory of your relationship with that character going forward. And maybe, just maybe, you'll both learn something about each other and yourselves.
Fuck you.
Cool, great. I cannot wait to do that with all these other colorful characters. I mean, look at these guys. Patrick Batman, Leper Convict, pair of glasses short of every fetish I ever had, and of course, finally, continue what we already started with, my boy, Femme Brule. What do you mean I shouldn't say that? He's gay? I just thought he was European. But then we get to episode 3 and, oh, okay. I guess I kind of assumed that they would resolve the Invisigal thing like a little later, because it'll feel more even if we kind of weave in and out all these different character threads with each other. You know, it's fine. It's not a big deal. I'm sure in the next episode, some other characters will really get their time to Motherfucker! I was so excited to get to learn and know the rest of my team. Only the developers felt the same way. Now, I'm not saying this hyperfixation is necessarily the worst thing in the world. It's just hard not to at least get a little sad in retrospect because of just how much it highlights the game's
potential.
The best gameplay in a game about dispatching is the dispatching. Hooray! Get a call, decide who's least likely to break an arm pulling a cat out of a tree, and hope for the best. Assigning points to strengthen strengths or shore up weaknesses along the way, with the occasional decision to make when a complication arises. It doesn't seem like much, and it isn't. The fact that you're heavily invested in their success or failure due to the writing and performances being good, which they really are, is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. Sure, but the strategy that is there paired with a little bit of randomness makes this process consistently satisfying. So much so, I was genuinely surprised they didn't have an unlockable dispatch-only mode of some kind. Or at least a skip cutscene button. What, is it in the voice actor's contract that their dialogue can't be skipped? I just want to log in and chill with a shift or two. Is that so wrong? Though, as much as I really like dispatching, it certainly isn't without its flaws. For example, late in the game, we're introduced to a mechanic where if you're too good at a thing, usually punching, you lose. Makes sense. Crossfire casualties are concerns reserved for heroes, not villains. If it's thematically, narratively, the problem is, no matter how many times you write workplace comedy, in your advertising, genre expectations got a grippier than I like to think Coup is, and that's just plain hard to break. When people see superhero, at the end of the day, they think biff, bam, pow, and judging by the end of the game, the devs are not exactly immune to this. Equidistance aside, the combat stat is going to be even more elevated and more center-focused in your average player's mind than it already is on the character sheet. When they look at a character's stats, they're going to see stats to ignore, stats to focus on, and a stat to put a point or two in at least regardless, just in case they need to throw some hands. And that point or two alone can make it hard to course correct even if this mechanic weren't introduced so late in the game. Collateral damage management mechanics could be a great way of helping to tell the story via gameplay. Unfortunately, all it really tells the player is that they should have picked a different number to make slightly bigger 3 episodes before this particular mechanic was even introduced. And all it really means is that there'll be a few missions where you have to send someone solo or soaked, if you even have anyone to send at all. If you set up a player to make a decision before they even know they're making one, there's no way for them to feel responsibility for it, whether it goes good or bad. Speaking of missed opportunity to make you feel like a middle managing mentor, I certainly wouldn't have minded less dev time spent on a hacking minigame that lets you do your team's job for them, and more time on one that lets you do yours. For example, I cannot count the number of times in my primary playthrough this petite potato person punched up his way through impossible odds and into my heart, coming in clutch, and being kind of charismatic and hard to keep down any more than he already is.
Fuck off.
Combined with my attention to detail that's apparently even less developed than his legs,
Oh, get him off! Get him off! Oh!
I saw nothing but leadership in this man's future. I wanted to promote him, assign points to him in the bullpen's ranking system, sit him down in the conference room, give him a review, tell him he reminds me of a younger me, treat him to a lunch meeting at a superpower titty bar, drunkenly run over a vagrant driving home from said titty bar, dump the body, and be forever bound by our dark and terrible secret. Or, at the very least, having the successes and failures during dispatching affect their confidence in themselves and or me. This could lead to abandonment of the team, or outright betrayals, or hell, even just the occasional debuff performance until we start doing our damn job. Just a little more depthful and thematic gameplay in which my successes and failures felt more like they mattered, where gameplay feels more like a continuation of that narrative than merely a fun interruption of it. The biggest impact our gameplay has on our visible team members comes in the final shift. If you don't clip your cut companion's wings in time, Brunette Hoodie here will take away the option to let them back on the team. And why does she do this?
After all that you're a bunch of betas talk, let's let him spend a few months in prison. Then we'll see how much of an alpha he thinks he is.
That's right. Not because he torched the city, not because he's eating people again, but because, you gotta admit, the Manosphere, it's pretty cringe, my dude. Can we get some L's in the chat for the Manosphere? Now, I'm certainly no stranger to keeping in a joke you like, even if it comes at the slight expense of the work as a whole. I mean, you've been watching this video, you understand. But I struggle to glaze the writing in a story game too hard when during one of the few and biggest times the story works with the game in any significant fashion, any meaning gets sacrificed on the altar of a cheap LOL. Especially with a line that works a lot better coming from one of your buzzed friends improving around a D&D table at 1 in the morning than it does in a story that's actually being written. Now again, I'm not saying they have to have our gameplay affecting story. God of War, Last of Us, narrative-heavy RPG like Mass Effect does very little of that outside of the dialogue. I mean, to be fair, the combat in those games didn't feel like a begrudging afterthought, but it's just hard not to mourn the missed potential when it's done so well right under our noses. Why you should play Dispatch by Adhoc Studios. You are Robert Robertson, aka aka man who works as an EMS dispatcher tasked to stand and deliver a superpowered degenerate from a life of inevitable villainy to one of meaning, of doing the right thing, making a difference, while deciding just what exactly that means for yourself, all while making sure one of those goals doesn't screw up the other. And speaking of two people screwing each other up, let's talk about romance. Believe it or not, there could have been more romance content than we got. Apparently it got caught because the developers didn't think watching a little superheroic insemination would be all that interesting. Which, hats off to the developers, because it suggests to me that they're likely getting laid far more than their audience apparently is. I mean, have you seen Dispatch Twitter? No, don't look it up. At least not without an incognito tab and a Mardi Gras amount of rosaries ready and raring to roll. I swear, they are enthralled with a thirst not even the sluttiest fanfic pic of Waterboy could quench. You got two choices. Blonde Blazer, vaguely adorable mom wife in the making who's 2 shots or bottles away from mistaking our freckled face for a bar stool 10 minutes after meeting us while still secretly dating an emotionally stunted demigod. And don't give me the, she's not flirting with you, you're just a gooner pervert incel who doesn't understand No, you're right. This is a gently caressing your face while gazing deeply into your eyes of friendship. Classic friend platonic stuff. I do it with my bros all the time. Give me a break. Blonde Blazer's doing the woman equivalent of whipping out your hog and saying it ain't gonna suck itself. And then we got Invisigal who...
You must be pretty fucking desperate. It's cool though, you know? Desperate's kind of my type. He's got a lot of bruises. Which I'm into.
Kind of morbid. Which I'm kind of into.
Jesus, what doesn't make Zoomer Goldo here slide out of her chair? She's half a step removed from writing my vagina on a cartoon mallet and whacking you over the head with it. Edgy, angry, smokes, pokes. Got it. Now, people can argue over which is the best Blazer. It's Blonde Blazer. It's Blonde Blazer. There's some red flags, but it's Blonde Blazer. Obviously, it's Blonde Blazer. If you're over 25, it's clearly Blonde Blazer. Go back and forth all you want. I mean, some like to point out this lingering look she gives you if you do go the blonde route, comparing it to Blazer's relative indifference if you make the opposite decision. This means Blazer doesn't really care about you. What Fizzy felt was true love. When really, being able to move on from any feelings you might have after having barely any interactions with someone is a fairly strong sign of being what I like to call an adult. And I would like to point out the points of thumbsticks thumbs and how if you had made another decision in this part, Invisigal is more than happy to guide them into you.
Hey, thumbstick, behind you.
And just minutes after describing how awful and dangerous these people are. Yeah, it's true love. True love. Invisigal, the character, is a good romance option. Invisigal, the person, is not. And sure, I enjoy making simpery-laden I-can-fix-her jokes as much as the next he, she, the degenerate on Twitter, but really, I'm old. There's no shortage of Invisigals out there, and at this point in my life, I've had more than my fill of them. And when I look at her as a potential romance option, all I really see is some eye-rollingly try-hard edgy kid who's too dumb to realize she's in far more need of a dad than a daddy. I'd still hit though. A lot of people, of course, would love to have more options. Flambe, Prism, Sonar, you sick fucks. Personally, I prefer Coup. Call me crazy, but I just got this weird, dark, twisted, naughty little kink for a woman who makes my life easier instead of harder for once. Unlike Invisigal, who couldn't spot a good decision if it were standing in a men's bathroom wearing nothing but Sour Patch Kids. But that's just my personal preference. We'll all have our own, and while you are likely to assume I'll again be all for expanding this aspect of the game to as many as our team as possible to accommodate as many different possible players' preferences as possible, in reality, only having 2, and these 2 specifically, works best for this particular story, this particular game is telling. The erratic ex-con with probable daddy issues who just wants to be someone who can be seen as someone capable of doing the right thing. Or the stable established hero who just wants to do the right thing and help people while being seen as a person too. And there you are, a recently unstable established hero with definite daddy issues with a path behind him and before him, which could very understandably make what the right thing is and who he is now and should be all kind of hard to see. Robert exists as something of a halfway-ish point between these two. Not in the me do dark side playthrough, me bang edgy scene girl. Now me do light side playthrough, me turn blonde lady into PTA mom. But in the sense that there's enough parallels and contrasting elements between Robert and each of the 2 love interests that it creates fertile ground for several different stories that explore and express the same themes and ideas to organically spring up from the player just playing. Now, I've dumped on Invisigal quite a bit, and that's not stopping anytime soon, but I actually started to warm up to her a lot on my second playthrough. Now, was it because of example reason 1? Or maybe example reason 2, perhaps? No. It's because this time, I added Phenomenon to the team, just to see different stuff. But it meant that Waterboy was no longer around to soak up my mommy mentor mojo like the eager little sponge that he is. Waterboy, he's different from the others. He wants to be there completely, but he seems the least capable. He's not a criminal, he's just kind of a nervous wreck, and with a few scenes and a brief interaction, I became so invested in him succeeding. I set him up for success every chance I could. Oh, he'd do great in this mission, send him. Oh, and send him some help, send him 2 helps, send him all the helps. And when I say he'd be good for a mission, I'm not even talking from a stat perspective. You see here, from the descriptive language, it suggests the mission in question utilizes the vigor statistic, indicating that, no, none of that. Maybe the old broads will think he's sweet, right? Kind of remind them of their grandson they wish would visit a little more. It might endear him to them, he'd have a better experience, boost his confidence a little bit, and he'd be more likely to be successful. I was invested in the person, which immersed me in the world. So I made gameplay choices not as a player of a game, but as a person in that world. And in spite of all the Invisiscreen time shoved down my throat for all those hours,
from my mouth to my butt,
it was a feeling I could only really begin to feel, and a role of a mentor I could only really begin to play, with this guy no longer around to overshadow her in my mind. Not because she's a bad character, but because I, as a human with my own specific set of human experiences and traits and flaws and my own individual experiences with the game, connected more to this human than this human. And if a player is given avenue to respond in kind, to make a decision to affect the game as a result of how they were affected by the game in the first place, then they have the potential to be more locked in, more invested in the narrative, character, story, world, whatever, than the most billion-dollarist cinematic experience anyone on this planet could ever muster in an audience. And if you're not like me, and are super duper invested in Vizzy as a character, you're in for some star treatment. Multiple dialogues, hackings, dispatches, and yes, even a few of those obnoxious QuickTime events, all contributing positively and negatively to a point system that will ultimately determine Invisigal's fate. But of course, the best example of this is stuff like this.
You know, like trying on a dress.
You were there.
I could be anywhere.
You would do that. Kill Shroud. Because you might get the chance.
But if they don't make that connection, and they do answer it in that particular way, and she does kill Shroud, it's set up just enough to where they might make that connection later. She did what I planned to do. She did what was in line with every more ruthless sounding explanation I gave randomly throughout the game. And now we've lost her to that darkness. She took it too far, and they're likely to feel all the more responsible for that fall. It's just the right amount of subtle to where it kind of works either way. It's such a clever way to, without shoving it in the player's face, convey to that player that this conversation, their answer, their ideology, opinion, formed by their interactions with the game thus far, the role that they're playing, matters. Wait, what do you mean it doesn't matter? So no points at all. No points at all. Declaring whether you'd kill Shroud or not in a game about being a mentor has nothing to do with your de facto mentee killing Shroud or not. Damn it, Adhoc, I was so impressed with you just now. In spite of that, a lot with Invisigal is fairly well done. It's just a shame that some of us don't really get to experience that because the game and story are so divorced from each other in nearly every other area. Here I am already naturally, organically acting as if the relationship point system mechanic does exist with Waterboy and Punch Up and some of the others, and without even thinking about game mechanics. But it doesn't matter. Very little interaction with all of these fun characters does. Is Lean Beef Potato Pancake cranky that you sent their flying animal friend back to the aviary? Who cares? You'll be drinking buds before you know it. Flambe finds out you're the guy who set his teeth on fire and made sure you can only order a round of beers in German. Who cares? He plays hooky and you get a funny cutscene. Fair trade, am I right? Call out Golem, let it slide. Kick him out, let him stay. Doesn't matter. He's saving you if you need it, regardless of your actions. There's some effect along the way, of course, but only in the ways most superficial. You're all friends in the end regardless. I find it kind of funny that they've since come out regretting to put so much emphasis on Invisigal when it's their obvious obsession with her. That is the only semblance of a suggestion that such a game mechanic might even remotely exist, maybe. But the fact that it's hidden means that you don't know it doesn't exist for the other characters. The better to sell you on the fact that your choices matter. But the elephant in the room is this was kind of out of necessity. Once decided to have a fully animated pre-rendered TV show with some gameplay sprinkled along the way, a certain narrowness and focus is paramount. I imagine it would have been nearly impossible to do what I would have liked it to have done, but with all the time and budget you'd have to spend pre-vising Vizzy. It's just hard not to imagine how much more meaningful and impactful this, again, very good experience could have been, trading actors and animation for text and JPEGs.